Hi, welcome to Think Human. I'm Chris, and in this video I want to talk about ego death, a profound experience which is one of the most life-changing experiences that I have ever had. I could honestly say it comes by many names from many different religions, from enlightenment to God consciousness to cosmic consciousness, and all of these names sound kind of voodoo and woo and kind of crazy and out there. But for what the experience itself really is, I would say those names are absolutely justified. So I don't come from any religious background. I don't put any associations in there. I don't believe in God in the normal kind of sense or anything like that. If you know my videos and if you know what I'm talking about and what I'm like, you know, I'm into none of that pseudoscience. But this experience is unlike any other that we encounter in normal everyday life. This state of consciousness, ego death, is a different state of consciousness, and it's a real state of consciousness that happens all over the world to different types of people, and the experience has some commonalities with all who experience them. Now, for me, when I had this experience was when I took psilocybin mushrooms to help me cure my depression. I was in a really dark place and I did some research, and I found that these kind of substances might be exactly the thing that I need to give me a different kind of perspective and to see my life and my issues from a kind of a non-personal point of view, from looking at my own life far away in an objective sense. And I thought that would be really useful, which it turned out to be. So, but at the end of the day, I got way more than I bargained for. So now to ego death itself. So the experience itself, when it starts, you begin to feel different. It's like your mind begins to open, if you could ever imagine it. It's a really strange experience. So I will try to describe, this can never be put into words what the experience itself actually feels like, but I will try to describe it with words, how it felt like. So the moment when it happened to me, I was in my own room and I was thinking about something, and of course I was stripping. I was in the middle of this journey that I was on with these mushrooms, and I was in the middle of my room, and at some point I was thinking something, and then it's like everything just went away. It's like everything, all of my personality, everything disappeared, and I got this incredibly powerful feeling of clarity that I have never felt anywhere else in my life in such magnitude. Absolute clarity. What my name was, what my face looked like, what school I went to, anything like that, all of that fell away. My ego literally died. My personality, all of it went away. I was no person. I was only consciousness. And once this ego was taken away, you know, again, I'm telling like how it felt to me. It literally does feel like you are just pure consciousness that is connected to all of the universe. Literally. This sounds so crazy and so, you know, nonsensical hippie talk, like, you know, you smoke too much weed or whatever, but this is how this state feels like. You literally feel like your mind expands. You yourself die, whoever you think you are, your personality, your likes and dislikes and your needs and wants, all of that goes away. Who you think you are goes away, it's irrelevant. And the only thing that remains is consciousness. And this consciousness that remains once the ego is taken away is only expanded consciousness. And the best word for it is something like cosmic consciousness. And it didn't matter at that moment if I was on Earth or at the other side of the galaxy or wherever. It did not matter who I was before. And in that moment, it didn't even matter if I continued my life or not. It didn't matter if I was alive or dead. It felt like none of that mattered because I have this consciousness. I felt connected to all life and everyone. I felt like whatever problem or solution there is in the world, I could get a solution for that. Not me personally, but me having this consciousness in me. And this this sounds so crazy that I keep saying it, but this is the truth, how it really feels. It really does feel, it gives you an impression as if consciousness is some kind of field in the universe, and as if you are the receiver. And at this moment of ego death, you just 100% tap into the consciousness that is all across the universe, and then you feel connected with all life and everything around you. It's profoundly moving, and I was just pacing back and back and forth in my room, and I was just thinking like, oh my god, like I just can't believe it. I just can't believe it. I just can't believe it. In my head, I was dead. Like there was nothing of me left. It was only consciousness. You understand so clearly that nothing matters. All the petty things that we worry about, you know, going to school or work or personal issues, none of that matter. Once you get into this state of consciousness and you realize that we all have the same thing, we all have the same consciousness, and it's not limited to simply human beings. It spreads much wider than any of us could imagine. Now, you know, if this is a factual claim that I could make is another thing to say, but what I could say is that it felt like the most realist experience that I've ever felt. This loss of ego and the sense of consciousness that I had, this expanded awareness, was the most real feeling that I have ever felt in my life, and I can never and I will never forget it. And you know, what I'm saying are just words, so it's probably for you to listen to it. It's so difficult to imagine, like trying to kind of grasp it when we never have it in normal everyday experience. It's just so different from it. Yeah, at that moment you feel connected to everything, all creation, the entire universe. Any problems you might have think you had, they just absolutely fall away. And the most interesting thing about this experience is that it's not some crazy hallucination. It's about how genuine and real it feels. Because when you're having this experience of taking psychedelics, like I took these mushrooms, you're not like how it's usually portrayed in movies or TV shows, that you're like, you lose your mind and you like don't understand what the world is going on. It's the opposite. You understand the world way better than in normal reality, because your brain can communicate with all parts of the brain much better than it usually can. In normal everyday life, we have roadblocks in our minds, we have things holding us back, we have our thought patterns that we're caught up in, we have our egos. All of that is preventing us from seeing the bigger, clearer picture of what existence truly seems to be. So I hope this explains it in some kind of way. It is one of the most profound experiences I've ever had, and no matter what I say right now, I still feel like there is no way I can do it justice, because this experience is so profound. There is no way I can simply put it into words, and there is no way I can do justice to how it really feels like. But it gives a lot of insight into what it means to be a human being, and especially that our egos, our personalities are just constructs on top of something more important, and this more important thing, this underlying thing in all of us, is consciousness. Some people want to call it a soul or whatever, but what it really is consciousness, and that is pure consciousness. That is pure awareness of you just existing in the world, and that's it. You're here right now, and there are no thoughts racing, there are no opinions or no ideas. There is just clarity and connection with everything. And again, it was the realest feeling I've ever felt. What else could I possibly say about it if it can't be put into words? I'm really trying my best, but at the same time I feel like I'm failing tremendously, because no matter what I say, it could never tell you how it truly feels like. It's incredibly liberating experience. It's an incredibly freeing experience, because for me, being depressed, carrying all this weight with me, all my issues, all my problems, all the things that I thought that defined me, all of that fell away, and I realized that that's not even me. I don't have to carry that with me. What really is me is the consciousness, and what goes on top of that, the personas that we build, that is arbitrary. The only thing that matters is the pure consciousness, the experience. And at that moment, it, again, I'm not religious in any way, but at that moment I truly felt like there was a connection to God. Not God in the kind of guy in the clouds kind of connection, but the kind of connection that, I'm sure you heard this before from this video as well, but truly being connected to everything. And that is something that we just can't imagine in normal everyday life. But I think we can try to, and I think we can get closer to that, and I think we can get glimpses of that in everyday life. I think the world would be a much different and better place if every human being on the planet has had this experience, because it also helps us to understand to not take life so seriously. This moment that I had, this moment of ego death, was the most profound, life-changing and real experience that I have ever had, and it taught me to not take life so seriously. Because, and at the same time, it felt like we all die. This is also fleeting and also so incredibly beautiful and incredibly weird and crazy, but it's not hopeless and it's beautiful. But at the same time, it didn't, at that moment, it didn't matter if I lived or died. This is going into a bit more stranger territory again, but how it felt like at that moment is that if I were to die, it wouldn't have mattered, because there was no person, who was worrying about, as people normally think about afterlife, I'll go to heaven and then my, relatives and loved ones are there, and then we all say, hey, my name is this, and, we like to play, tennis or whatever, there is none of that. There is none of that. None of that matters. If there ever is afterlife, no person gets there. There is only consciousness that gets there. Just can't describe it, and I can imagine how crazy it sounds, because I know how crazy it sounds. But if you have felt it, then that is something that these are just the only words to describe it by, and the only way to describe it is a way that makes it sound absolutely crazy, because the experience is absolutely crazy and absolutely different from anything in normal everyday experience. And what is weird about it is that you're not delusional, you're not like, whoa, what is this or what is that? No, it's clarity, more clarity than ever before, as I keep repeating myself. Yeah, it's just vast, incomprehensible, and I truly felt connected to the cosmos. And if there is one thing in my life that I would say that has given me any idea to think about that there is more in this world and reality that we live in, I would say it is that experience, because that was the most clear and lucid that I have ever felt, and there was no me attached to it. There was no name or face or personality in that moment. There was only pure consciousness, and that consciousness was just bliss and joy and happy to exist. That type of existence was inherently enjoyable. To not have ego is inherently enjoyable. It's like, wow, okay, I'm here. At that moment when it happened, it felt like, again, this sounds crazy, I make like 100 disclaimers in this video, but how it felt like is that it was the consciousness of God that came into my body, and I was like, I just woke up in my room, and I was like, wow. I looked around like, I'm here, huh. okay, this is life, interesting, like, what can we do? Like, there's so much to do. And then I started thinking about all the problems of the world and how easily they could be solved because all of those are behind human egos. Every big issue that we have that we think is big and political, it's all behind egos. All the fall of humanity, if there ever will be one, or was one, or is going on the process, is because of human ego. All the greed, all the selfishness, all the nonsense, it's all because of egos. And if people didn't have that, if they had that clear view of consciousness, of unity, that we all fundamentally down, we all are one, even if you don't have that experience and haven't had that experience, and even if you never will, I really hope you do, even so, it doesn't matter, because we all have it underneath these egos that we carry around with us, all these personalities. We all have that same capacity for consciousness, this expanded consciousness, and that is what matters. So yeah, I was hesitant to make this video for a while, exactly because of this reason, that it sounds so crazy. And since most of my videos are really scientific and I talk a lot about objective science and reasoning, then to come up with something like this and to tell you that, you know, it felt as you would be connected with a god. And that God was no person or human either, let me be correct. It wasn't like God, some kind of a, 1,000-year-old wise man or something. No, God itself was consciousness, is consciousness. This is mindfuck. So neither does God have any personality, it simply is consciousness. And it is something to feel like, be consciousness, only consciousness, and everyone has it. And this is the reason why for a while I didn't make this video, because you see how insane this sounds. But again, you hear me say that this is the most real experience that I have ever felt. So do you see the conundrum that I'm in? Many people, depending on their previous sort of belief systems, if there is a Christian who has this ego death experience, they will say that they spoke with Jesus or something. If there is some kind of Muslim who had this experience, they will say that they spoke to Allah or was connected to Allah. But it is all the same thing. It's all the same thing. I'm not saying that religious people consciously know about it. I believe, sadly, this is something, this experience has been lost. So the idea of God has also been lost, what it truly could mean, that it is no persona. It couldn't care less, what happens in your personal life, or what you do in the evenings, or how are you nice to people or not. It couldn't care less. It doesn't have any qualities like that. It is pure consciousness. And I think that is lost, and religions are now chasing after some weird things that aren't even God. So again, I interrupt myself so much, and this video is so long, but I say that this is from me, completely a person that doesn't believe in any conventional sense of God as such. But if anyone was to ever ask me if there is anything that I would call close to God, I would say it is that experience of consciousness, of being fully conscious and only having conscious awareness and no ego attached to it at all. And it is so difficult to imagine, because our human lives are driven by egos. From the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, we have thoughts in our heads, we have narratives and stories that we tell ourselves. We think about things that happen in our lives, and we think that we take ourselves too seriously as personas, I think. That is a big lesson that I learned. Now, I couldn't claim anything 100%, and I won't. And I'm forever, asking questions and being skeptical and so on. But this is just how it felt to me. 100% more real than any other experience. It's not being delusional, it is being more clear than I've ever been clear in my life. Everything falls away. There is no personality left. There is just pure awareness. And that pure awareness, I felt as if I knew everything, and yet I knew nothing. Was also one of the qualities. I also felt like time didn't matter and space didn't matter. I also felt like what we call life and death doesn't matter either. And that should give you an idea of the magnitude of the experience that was, and why it was so life-changing. So I would wish that every human being would feel like this at one point in their lives. And I'm not telling people to go and do mushrooms, but I would encourage people to look into it and read other people's reports on what they felt like. And it is truly interesting, and it is life-changing. You know, I haven't been the same since, in the best possible way. It truly is what they call enlightenment, and that is for a reason. Now this sounds like super arrogant, but it truly is what one would call enlightenment. Because everything becomes in a fraction of a second, everything about the world becomes so clear and obvious. You know, the world is corrupt, there are tons of stupid people, life is short, life is beautiful, life is worth living. You all get that in a fraction of a second. All these things that we intellectually know and understand, but are difficult to feel in our hearts, those all come in a moment to you, all at once. And on top of that, you leave all of you behind. There is only conscious experience. And then why it's weird is that, you know, talking about afterlife and whatever, you know, it's such a, you know, mumbo jumbo topic, but if all of you is gone, literally everything that makes you is gone, everything that was me was gone, but I was still here. Consciousness was still here, even after everything that made up me, everything I thought that I was gone, dead. Something was still here, consciousness was still here, and that is, I think, so strange, and why it makes it one of the most fascinating experiences I've ever had. I think I made plenty of disclaimers in this video that this is how I felt at that moment. I do not believe in any kind of, you know, beings in the sky or whatever, but it has given me a different view on the nature of consciousness. It isn't something that I can preach with 100% certainty, because I always reserve the kind of knowledge and skepticism in myself that, you know, it is neurochemistry at the end of the day, but also we do not understand what consciousness fully is. And that feeling was almost like getting concrete evidence that consciousness is something much more than people tend to think in their everyday life. It truly was that. It's like you couldn't get any better piece of evidence for consciousness being something more than having ego death. This is quite a lot to take in, I believe. Yeah. So I hope it was interesting to listen to. Again, even after saying all I said, I did not do it justice, because you simply cannot describe this feeling. If you are interested in it and what I said and how this feeling seems to feel like, it is possible that at one point when I was talking about this, something in you felt like it was changing a little bit, like a part of you was kind of fading away a little bit and you became more self-aware. That's possible, and we can do these exercises, and I would encourage you to do that, to look at deep philosophical thinkers and to read more about ego death and ways to achieve it, because it is an amazing, worthwhile experience to every human being that gives enormous amount of perspective, especially if you have issues in your life or if you're not 100% happy with your life. But in any case, it's a feeling worth having. So again, I hope this was interesting in some way. I hope that it wasn't you know, so crazy, but it is so crazy that it's impossible to describe it without sounding absolutely crazy. But this is just how it is, and this is how it felt, and it felt 100% real to me, and this is just how it is. So I hope this was interesting. I hope you got some thoughts from this. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask and share them in the comments, and thank you so much for watching, and take care.